Well, hi, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This is the show that takes a look at what's happened the past week in Washington, D.C. through the lens of the second Trump administration. And joining me to do that, CBN News chief political analyst David Brody and the host of the Quick Start podcast for CBN, Dan Andros. And gentlemen, this week, Donald Trump celebrated his 100th day in office here in his second term. Obviously, he had one of these in the first term, but here in the second term, it has certainly been a wave of activity through these first 100 days. And now, as we're speaking, I think we're on day 102 or something, but whatever it happens to be, I'm curious to get your thoughts as we get started here this week on this week's show. David, I know you've discussed the 100 days in a couple different places here on CBN, but now that we're a couple days past it, give me your thoughts. Accomplishments for President Trump here in the first 100 days. What are some things that have gone right for the administration?
Well, first of all, let me just start with this. I feel very overdressed for this podcast. I just want to say, can we just start with that? Dan, I'm sorry. What were we going to say?
We can. I thought we were going to talk about Trump's first 100 days, and I thought it was very appropriate to wear my Gulf of America shirt.
Oh, very nicely played. Interesting. The Associated Press is not happy with you.
No.
Yeah. By the way, I sleep in this suit as well, just so you know. It's a dry cleaning bill, but it is what it is. What were you asking? No, 100 days. Got it. What was good about it? Well, not much. Back to you. No, actually a lot. Immigration. Right? A+. And I say A+. Well, it depends who you speak to, right? Or it depends who you talk to. But MAGA, with MAGA, of course, it's across the board A+. With voters kind of writ large, mixed grades. But immigration, and you got to break immigration down into two different categories, right? The border security. That is, come on, I mean, you can't even argue, and that's an A+. But then there's the immigration policy, and then we get into all of the judges' kerfuffles, if you will. Oh, which could be maybe a constitutional crisis, but anyhow, so there's that. So that's a little bit different. As for the economy, I mean, let's be honest what the grade is. The grade is incomplete. We just don't know. Everybody's going to make a big deal about these new GDP numbers in Q1, and we can talk about that, which we're not good at. There's contraction, obviously. But let's wait till Q4, and quite frankly, maybe to Q1 of 2026, because if those tax cuts get extended in the budget reconciliation bill, we probably won't see that type of effect until Q1 of 2026. So we'll see. It's incomplete on the economy, John, for sure.
Yeah, and I want to dive into the economy a little bit more in the next segment as well. We can kind of take a look at some numbers that came down this week. But Dan Andros, curious what your thoughts are on Trump's first 100 days. I kind of want to focus on some of the things that I think I don't think we can argue the point that he has kept a lot of the promises that he made during the campaign. Whether you like the promises he was making or don't like the promises he was making, he has largely done what he has said he was going to do.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest thing that would be in the pro column for the first 100 days of the Trump administration is sort of ushering in this unapologetic stance towards conservative views, towards Republican views, because I think what a lot of people in the country, particularly on the right, have been tired of is that we have to tiptoe around all of the sacred cows on the left. You can't say anything contrary to abortion. You can't say anything contrary to LGBT. You can't talk about this 6'8" man who's saying he's a woman, or else you're the bad guy. I mean, I think that's been going on long enough now that people are kind of frustrated at that. And also, too, the shaming of America as generally speaking bad, a bad influence around the world. I think a lot of people, regardless of their political stripes, are probably tired of that. Not that America's perfect or America's done everything wonderful, but, America's still the best country on the planet. And to sit here and bash America constantly about all the bad things we've done, I think people are tired of that. And I think Trump tapped into that on the campaign. And I think he's carried that into the first term. I kind of half jokingly wear the Gulf of America shirt, but it's just stuff like that, like where we're not ashamed to be Americans. And I think that's been probably the biggest win in the first 100 days, that he sort of really challenged that status quo that even when Republicans in the past would get in, they tiptoe around the progressive elite and not wanting to, stir the apple cart on that one. But to David's point, I mean, like, we're going to talk about the economy in a few minutes, but I mean, there are some question marks. I mean, I think the tariff policy is definitely one that's unorthodox for conservatives who generally don't like taxes. And people like Thomas Sowell that they've long looked up to, who have just criticized tariffs and say they're not a good policy. But it's obviously been a Trump idea for a long time. He's touted them for many, many years. So we'll see how that plays out, as David said. But I think for me, that was probably the biggest thing in the first 100 days.
John, a quick little 30 seconds on this. I also think it's important to compare apples to apples. The first 100 days of the first administration compared to the first 100 days of the second administration. And we can talk about a lot of the controversies that were there about Jeff Sessions recusing himself from Russia, and all that. I mean, we can go down that line. But really what I want to do here specifically is just say one thing, and that is that in the first 100 days of the first administration, President Trump and his folks were new to Washington. They were trying to figure out how to take on the federal bureaucracy. This time around, they had a battle plan to take it on. And some will call it a masterclass in what he's trying to do here. We'll see if it pans out. But there's a big difference. What a difference 8 years makes, or I'm sorry, not 8 years, 4 years makes, for sure. So I think that's a big difference too.
I want to get your guys' thoughts on what was the big story for the first couple months, and it's kind of petered out, I think, as some of the news that this group was making has kind of died down, and that's the Doge cuts. I mean, that was a huge part of the first half of the 100 days, and over the last couple of weeks, other things have moved to the top of the list. Certainly, tariffs, Ukraine war was certainly at the top of the list last week. As now the Doge seems to be winding down, David, I don't know if that's 100% accurate to say, but we're not hearing about Doges now at the Commerce Department looking at ways to cut things down. And they're trying to get into the Institutes of Peace to talk about how they can, what kind of cuts to make or we haven't heard a lot from Elon Musk the last couple of weeks. Reports are that he's trying to pull back and maybe wants to get back in charge of and in the day-to-day operations of what's going on with Tesla. Do you think, David, overall, the Doge cuts, everything, the controversy surrounding it, was that good for a good part of the first 100 days for the Trump administration, or was that mostly a negative for the first 100 days?
Well, I think truth is in the eye of the beholder. I think it depends who you talk to. I mean, my analysis of it is that Doge, specifically as to what you asked about whether or not it's winding down. No, I don't think it's winding down at all. I think what's happened is the PR battle has shifted. In other words, the PR and the public relations, specifically coming from the White House about Doge, has shifted. And what I mean by that is, hey, Musk, tone it down. Hey, Doge nerd geek squad team, do your things behind the scenes. Hey, cabinet members, cabinet secretaries, hey, take responsibility for what Doge is doing. In other words, there's been a shift. If you noticed in the cabinet meeting this week, Marco Rubio was talking about, it was a quick thanks to Doge, but then he talked about all the stuff that the Secretary of State's office has done to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. In other words, it was all very cabinet centered. So I think there's been a shift from a PR standpoint to say, let's put the focus away from Musk, away from the Geek Squad, let them do their work. I still think it's going on. It is going on for sure. But let the cabinet secretaries take responsibility and credit for it, because there was some tension there for sure.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doge, at least from an image perspective, I think we're probably yet to see like what actual dent they made in the overall size and scope of the federal government. But I think, like David was saying, for MAGA, certainly for conservatives, this is something that has long been a frustration on the right, that a conservative would get into office and the size of the government would still grow and grow and grow. And it was like, you're still, you're heading, if your ideology is to try to shrink the size of the federal government, and then no matter who you vote for, they go in there and the size of the government just creeps up and up and up and up. That's frustrating, and you can start to feel disenfranchised at that point. So I think it was important for the Trump administration to show they were at least serious about trying to tackle this. And again, I think that fits into sort of the vibe that I was talking about that the administration brought in the first 100 days, which is like, we are serious about this. We're not going to just go and chit chat with Nancy Pelosi and see what kind of deal we can make. No, we're going to do what the left does. When they get in, they have no shame whatsoever in their policies and their ideals and the things they believe in, and then they, take advantage. I mean, look what happened with Obamacare back in the early days of the Obama administration. They had the majority, and they did not care what anybody thought about that. It was a policy they wanted to do, and so they were going to do it no matter what. And I think this is the same sort of tone you're seeing from the Trump administration with Doge, and I think it's something that we hadn't seen from the right in a long time. And the last thing I'll say. And I think they were kind of, I don't remember the date, maybe David remembers, but I think it was planned all along to sort of like wind down in this first year at some point, at least slow down the activities. It was like they came out of the gates blazing, but then, but I think that was part of the plan. So we'll see how it all ends up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was part of the plan. Hey, just to be clear, this is a town, Washington. I'm sure you guys have heard, right? That doesn't change, right? I mean, they keep on spending and spending. And I was speaking with Byron Donalds this week, and we're going to air that on the 700 Club next week. It was a fascinating interview. He was really interesting. And what he said was, here in Washington, it's like, here's the analogy. It's like you've never worked out in your life, and then they say, go ahead and bench press 250 pounds. You're not going to do it. You're not going to be able to do it. And this is what Doge has been trying to do, to bench press to 250 pounds quickly. And so there's going to be growing pains. And so I think with Doge, you got to understand that there's going to be some cuts. We've already seen the cuts. It's going to be more. But this idea that you're going to change the trajectory of the federal government like this, it's not going to happen, obviously, overnight. You got to walk before you can run. And I think that's an important perspective here.
Last thing on this 100 days question, the polling that has come out over the last few days from Fox News, from ABC News, I think there was a Reuters poll that came out, largely seeing the American people, most Americans, especially the non-MAGA Republicans, independents, and certainly Democrats, giving the president low job approval numbers, some of the lowest approval numbers for presidents in their first 100 days, according to these polls. Now, my question is, of course, with polling, certainly there's error there. There has been error there. I think that the polling for the campaign, the presidential campaign, was largely pretty close at telling the story. I think they mostly got it right. I'm not remembering any polls that showed Harris up by like 6 points or 4 points, and then she obviously lost the way she did on election night. But generally speaking, with a poll like this, Dan, what is your confidence in the reliability of these numbers? You have one from Fox News, from ABC News, so one from a conservative outlet, one from a left-leaning outlet. What is your thoughts on what do we really trust these numbers?
Well, I always take any poll with a grain of salt unless I know exactly, who did it, how many people they surveyed, have they done this in the past? When I look at the polls from the election that you mentioned, one of the ones I leaned on heavily was the Real Clear Politics average, which didn't lean on one individual poll, but looks at all the average of them. And that one has been pretty good over the years of coming out. And I think this time, like you were saying, I think it was not much different. I think it came out pretty accurate to what we were seeing in the lead up to the election. So that said, any individual poll, I always take it with a bit of a grain of salt. There's going to be flaws in them, but I do think there are some concerns that the Trump administration should take seriously. And I think primarily it's with the economy. And we were saying this all along, guys, in the lead up to the election, that people were sick and tired of paying, gazillion dollars for eggs and basic necessities like gasoline and things like that. And so if you then come into the office and it's like, still pretty similar. I know some prices have come down here and there, but if you have some concerns on the economy, and that was the thing you touted coming in, I could see how there'd be some consternation there, and that could potentially be reflected in the polls. I think it's mostly, to me, I think the issue is not even necessarily with the tariff policy. It's sort of with the implementation of it. And we could talk about that, but regardless of if this is Trump's plan or not to sort of, throw something out there and then get the deal done or whatever, the markets and people are confused. And so I think that's leading to some consternation, some uncertainty. And I think, just like we were saying before the election, the economy matters to people. And if they're feeling it, that could translate into the polls. But it's early for that, but it's just a couple months in. So, we'll see if Trump takes credit or blame or whatever for how it's going now. But right now he's been pitching the long term. So we'll see.
Well, even though immigration might be kind of the heart and soul of the MAGA movement, the truth of the matter is Trump is going to kind of live and die politically and from a polling perspective with the economy. And for two reasons. One, the economy always polls number one. But beyond all of that, Trump made his brand, not just with the art of the deal, but usually it was the art of the economic deal. In other words, he's a businessman. He made all of his money as a businessman. He's considered successful from a business and economic perspective. And so if that narrative narrative fails him, if this goes south and the golden age becomes the golden egg of America, then there's major problems here for him. So that's that. As for the polls, I don't really believe any of them. And here's what I mean by I don't believe any of them. I don't mean I have tinfoil on my hat or my hair with the lack thereof hair. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that you got to understand the Media Research Center did a survey that showed that in the first 3 months, first 100 days of this administration, 92% of the coverage was negative against President Trump. I mean, this is just human nature, guys. If you tell someone just in your orbit, let's just say you keep hearing, let's say you, John, or you, Dan, or myself, if we keep hearing every single day, we're no good, 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 we might start to question whether or not we're actually good. The point is that folks out there have been told by this media, proven by the Media Research Center, not just my analysis, but proven with the actual numbers, that the negative stories against Donald Trump have been fast and furious, to quote Vin Diesel. And because of that, you're going to have indeed that reflected in the polling. So that's why I'm not quite sure I even believe the poll numbers. Do I think there are icebergs right ahead, in the words of the captain of the Titanic? Absolutely, I do. But that doesn't mean these polls are as bad as they look.
Yeah, I think that's what made the Fox News poll so interesting. And I know Stephen Miller I think it was John Roberts. He was interviewing with John Roberts on Fox News and pushing back against the Fox News poll, and essentially saying, the Fox News pollster that they have is needs to be fired. I think was essentially what he was saying. So it is interesting. We've talked about the legacy media and how much of an impact they actually still have. You're right, David. It's possible they do still have an impact, certainly in how we view things, and it's keeping these numbers in mind, especially now as we move on to the economy, because like you mentioned, these numbers are sometimes going to reflect what we see and feel from the economy. And the Commerce Department announced earlier this week that the economy contracted by 0.3 of a point in the first quarter of this year. In response to that, President Trump on Truth Social referred to this as still being the Biden economy, and was saying essentially you can't really call this the Trump economy until the third quarter. I will ask you guys to start off, David. At the end of last year, in the fourth quarter, when some of the economic numbers started to turn around, he referred to it as the Trump economy because in his mind, the analysts and the American people were looking ahead at what a Trump administration was going to look like and factoring that into their decision. So I guess, where does one president's economy stop and the next president's economy begin? It seems like there is some goalpost moving here.
Well, first of all, Trump likes to play the game, in terms of basically being optimistic about certain things and not optimistic about others, depending on what it is. So that's kind of like the disclaimer. Having said that, I agree with him. It's Q1. Let's break down Q1 for a second. All right. He comes into office January 20th. So let's take the month of January away. So now we're talking about February and March and April, 3 months instead of 4. Now, in those 3 months, he's doing all of these executive orders that are basically undoing a lot of what Biden did. And, you can't just kind of do an executive order and go poof, like a pumpkin at midnight, all of a sudden everything's better. It's going to take some time. So this idea that Q1 is on Trump, I don't necessarily buy that at all. I don't even know if Q2 as much is on Trump. I think when we get into Q3, definitely Q4 for sure. Then we see, because what happens in Q3 and Q4? At that point, we'll have a better sense of the tariffs and whether any deals came through. That's why I think that the next 100 days actually are more crucial than the first 100 days, actually, because he's going to have to show some progress on these tariff deals. And so there's that. And then you put all of that together with the fact that you got, what did I say, the tariff deals, and anyhow, I can't quite remember. See, this is what happens when you get older. It just you know where it is? Here, I see it evaporating. It's gone.
Yeah,
it's done.
It just floated away.
It's floated away. But at some point I'll come back and tell you what I was thinking. But the bottom line is quarter 3, quarter 4. Those are the big ones. I know what I wanted to say. Budget reconciliation. It came back. Budget reconciliation. When that gets done, and it should get done, it'll be tough, but it'll get done July, August, something like that. Then you've got to give 3 to 6 months for that to take effect. So that's why I was saying quarter 1 of 2026. But definitely quarter 3, quarter 4 is when we'll start to see that, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, I think it's mostly narrative building at this point. Like early on in the administration, the economy is so complex that yes, the president's policies are going to impact the economy, but like David was saying, it's not like you just, well, I did the pen, now the economy's good and great. Like it's obviously way bigger than that, way more complex than that. There are other factors, but the fact of the matter is the buck is going to stop at the White House, whether ultimately that's a fair assessment or not at the end of the day. But I do think you need to give it a definitely a longer road before you can truly say, I don't know what that exact date and time is, but the public will definitely decide at some point and will have their patience either, run out if things aren't going well at some point, and we'll know when that point is. But yeah, you can't, it's not just like the administration flips and then all of a sudden everything's on Trump. But that said, I mean, he is pushing this tariff policy, which is uncharted territory. So we'll see how it plays out. A lot of people, even some conservatives, are not exactly loving the idea of tariffs and the taxes, like basically a tax, and then you get into these trade wars and there's tit for tat. The gambit is essentially America's bigger and stronger economically than all these other countries, so we can withstand it, and they're going to have to bend the knee at some point. But we'll see if it works out or not. But I think that date is down the road, TBD.
Yeah. And I think with the tariffs, certainly part of what we've seen with some of the numbers, especially with the stock market, but also the bond market, has been reflected by even here in the first quarter and the second quarter by things that are happening in real time. So I agree with you. Like in terms of the larger economic look at the country, and GDP numbers kind of more factor those in. But there are some things that are being affected now in the economy right now by things the president is doing right now. And I don't disagree with either of what you're saying. I think it is kind of unfair to put, say that a president owns the economy right when they come into office, but and this goes for all presidents, they will certainly take the credit for good things that are happening in the economy in
Right.
real time, even if they're saying it's not my economy when some of the bad things are happening. But Dan, I wanted to get your thoughts, and David, yours too, in just a second, on the messaging with regard to the economy right now. And specifically, he was asked in a cabinet meeting on Wednesday about the trade war with China. And I want to read a quote to you. Stephen Miller kind of doubled down on this in an interview on Thursday. And I want to get your thoughts on how you think this is going to land with voters. He was asked about the trade war with China, and he said, they made $1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more. What should we make of this mindset, Dan? Is he being misunderstood because he's getting pilloried by critics who are claiming that he's dismissing the idea that there may be less on the shelves for people to buy, and those things are going to cost more? I mean, that's at the heart of what we're talking about here, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not a good quote. I mean, I'd like to see more explanation from him, maybe fuller context at some point. I can look that up. I did not see the full comments there, but that is not. I mean, this one individual quote's not going to like sink him from a narrative perspective. But I think if that ends up being sort of the talking point and it's repeated over and over, that is not a good place to land. You do not want to be in the Jimmy Carter world of, yeah, I know things are expensive, but just put on a blanket, it'll be great.
Right.
I don't think that's the tone you want, especially when you were promising the golden age. If you're promising the golden age, I should be able to buy a bunch of dolls at a low price. I shouldn't have to go. The golden age shouldn't be, well, I got to limit my doll intake and it's going to cost me more and I just get 2 instead of 30. I think it's tough messaging. I think that's uphill messaging. If it continues, we'll see if he continues or if it was just a one-off quote.
Ditto. How's that for an answer? I agree with all that.
That works. All right, last thing, and I thought this was really interesting. We discussed it a little bit before the show. The White House has created a website on whitehouse.gov that looks an awful lot like the Drudge Report. It's called the White House Wire. It looks very drudgish, and for those of you who follow political news, you know what the Drudge Report is. It's been around for about a quarter century now, and essentially it's a series of headlines and articles that you can click on touting the Trump administration's accomplishments. To me, David, it kind of looks like a very slick way of presenting press releases and different news stories that probably President Trump has seen that he would like other people to see, or that the White House would like to trumpet. What is your take on whitehouse.gov putting together a website that looks like a news media website that is going to be strictly, certainly just to tout the president's accomplishments, news stories that they want to get out, and any other PR messaging that the White House wants?
Well, it would be one thing if they didn't have the word White House in it, right? White House wire. At that point, you're kind of deceiving folks and saying, wait, what is this exactly? But they're saying, look, it's White House wire. Go to whitehouse.gov. I mean, this is our view, our take. At least they're being upfront about it, number one. I think that's important to understand. Also, the other part of this is, look, they believe that the liberal media is not covering the stories that they think should be covered in a certain way. And this is the alternative viewpoint. It's kind of like, new streaming media, the new media seat and all of that. It's the same thing. It's just done kind of digitally now. But see, here's my deal, because I know a lot of people are going to have a problem with it. Oh, and they're going to talk about Kim Jong-un, and they're going to talk about dictator, and they're going to talk about, all this crazy stuff that they want to say about Trump and what he's doing here in terms of state-sponsored media and all that. It's not any of that at all. Look, it's their way of fighting back and trying to win the narrative battle. And I must tell you, and this has been my view all along, I would rather have listen. Do I in a utopia world, do I want the robo perfect journalist with the big J on the chest? Yes, that's exactly what I want. I want fairness and balance, and I want to see both sides. Okay. Sadly, we don't have that today. We just don't. So therefore, if we're going to operate in what we have in front of us, what I want to see is people to be clear about their intentions and about where they're coming from. So if it's White House wire, I think I kind of know what your prerogative and perspective is. And that, to me, is a service to the viewer, rather than the Jake Tappers and the other anchors on CNN and others on MSNBC who like to say, welcome tonight to the story, tonight's lead story. Come on, give me a break. You're playing news anchor, but you're not. You're a partisan hack. And that, to me, is much more dangerous when you're trying to fool the audience. And now, to be clear, Jake Tapper and other these folks, they don't think they're fooling the audience. They think they've got the capital J. I understand what they think, but I'm talking about what the real motive is. And we've seen Jake Tapper. I keep mentioning Jake Tapper because he's a poster child, if you will, for the delineation line between news, because he reports on news, but he also has commentary. He does both. But he's on CNN, the most trusted name in news. You can't do that to viewers who are not astute, who don't pay attention to this type of stuff, and just say, I heard it on CNN, it's good for me. That's dangerous. And so I would rather everybody just reveal their cards, and then you make the decision the best way after you hear both sides. That's my view.
Yeah, I look at the site, and to me, it depends on how it's executed. So if it looks like they're trying to make articles that are news articles, that it's really just a White House press release, but disguised as a news article. Yeah. Not a fan of that. But I mean, I haven't looked at it. I mean, I'm just seeing this today, so I'm just browsing through it. But if they look press release-ish, and you get a sense that this is a statement from the administration, then fine, no problem with it. I do see that they're linking out to other sites. So to me, that's the only issue, is as long as it doesn't start feeling like, oh, I've got a news article here about how wonderful the Trump administration is, and you can read this news article, and then you look and it's from the White House. Well, I mean, that's Pravda essentially, right? But it doesn't look like, at least not yet, that's what it is. They're linking out to articles they like from outside sources, which are, as soon as you click on it, it's very evident it's an outside source. And then the ones I clicked on from the White House look very much like a press release once you click on it. So as long as they keep that mode, I think it's fine.
Well,
it's a nicer way to have a press release site than the generic website that was there before.
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Right. And I was going to say, no, nobody's going to the whitehouse.gov and seeking out the press releases. Like that's just that's not what anybody does. So, yeah, I mean, as long as everybody is clear about what this is, and like David said, you can't help but be clear about exactly what this is. It's perfectly obvious what this is. I would say it's important to know, and it's important for the person running the website to understand, like, this is the official White House page. So you need to be very careful about the sites that you are pulling news stories from. The last thing you want to do is pull something from a media organization or an outlet that has ties to foreign government, maybe trying foreign influence. Like, these things should be vetted very carefully before they're posted on whitehouse.gov. But provided all those different things happen, I know as a journalist, I do sometimes want to seek out, what does the Trump teams think and say about this?
Exactly.
I want to know where to go with that kind of stuff. It might not be my go-to place for, I want to really drill down on details on a story or something. But if I want to know how the Trump administration feels about a story, that would probably be one of the first places then that I would go.
And and I'm looking too, Dan, on White House Wire. And yeah, of course, you're right. They're doing mostly outside articles to link to their points of view that are written by others. I did notice that on the top of their air quote White House Drudge Report, if you will, they do link not to press releases, but to like an X post by Scott Bessent, right? Or someone from the administration. So that's kind of like maybe middle ground. And then I also noticed in red, they have this 3 in red, and if you click on those, it's actually 2 YouTube speeches of the president. So that now you're going even further into that murkier ground, but at least they put it, I think they're putting it in red on purpose. It seems like they would put it on red on purpose. Like, hey, these are whatever. I don't know if that means they're videos or that means that these are coming from the White House themselves. Anyhow, it's interesting.
I just had to point out, if you scroll down, Crutch, if you scroll down to the bottom there,
let me look.
you got to love Trump's branding prowess. Keep going down. You will see the scroll on the bottom, 47 24/7. I mean, the guy
That's pretty good.
He's so good. That's so good.
He's great with the catch lines. I mean, there's no denying that.
And the picture of Trump too. Just kind of like, I'm all business. Yeah. I'm Edward R. Murrow, on the desk. It's interesting.
One more thing before we go, and I didn't have this. This is breaking news as we are recording this here on Thursday morning. Yeah. Multiple outlets are reporting that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz is out as National Security Advisor at the White House. Of course, Mike Waltz was kind of mixed up in this Atlantic situation with the Houthi attack. Of course, Pete Hegseth has taken most of the brunt on that one. But the reporting is that he's lost the confidence of other administration officials, and so former Congressman Mike Waltz is out as National Security Advisor. David, we're just kind of seeing this now as we're finishing up the podcast. But do you have any initial thoughts on this?
Signal. I mean, that's it. I mean, it was a big deal. And it makes me think of that interview that he did with Jeffrey Goldberg and a couple others, because the truth of the matter is, and this is what I don't know if we talked about this. I can't remember. My memory is fading, but I thought we talked about this, but this idea that Trump kind of begrudgingly respects people like that get it right. And Jeffrey Goldberg got that story right, because he not only reported the story, but he reported about the internal problems that Mike Waltz was having at the time. And so then he gives Goldberg the interview. To me, that should have been a warning sign to all of us that, like, you know what? Writing's on the wall, that Trump knew that Goldberg was onto something. And here's the thing, he respects, it's weird, right? It's like a Dr. Phil thing. He respects his critics because they did a good job and got it right. Like, wow, that was good reporting, even though he'll never say that. He'll never publicly say it. Anyhow, in terms of Waltz, that my take is it's signal and other things. I've heard other things as well. I can't report that individually, but I could just tell you that the word sloppy comes to mind, and it's not just on signal.
Yeah, I mean, it is a red flag. I mean, that was a bad mistake. I mean, there's just no getting around it. Like,
and he invited Goldberg. He was the one that, or I say he, his staff.
Right. Yeah. Right. And again, the buck stops with him on that, because he's allowing his staff to create that signal chat. And that's just an inexcusable mistake. Not only do you put somebody outside of the government window that cannot have the clearance doesn't have the clearance for this information. It's also a hostile reporter to the administration. Like, that's just, I mean, at that point, you almost, if you're Trump, you almost have to be like, was this intentional? It's so bad of a mistake. So yeah, I mean, I mean, I think it's one of those things that I guess you could, in today's day and age, you could probably weather if it was the only thing and it was just a slip up by some low level staffer that messed it up. You could probably weather it, but like you said, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was probably other stuff too.
And John, let me just quickly say, let's go back to the first administration. Michael Flynn, the national security advisor, the NSA director there, gone in February. That was that whole thing with Mike Pence at the time. So you had that in February, gone after 2 months, not even 2 months, less than about a month actually. And here it's what, May 1st, so about 3 months or 3 or 4 months. No, February, March, April. Yeah, about 3 months.
And Hexit's not going to. Sorry to interrupt, David. Hexit's not going to take. I mean, you just went through the process to get him, appointed.
Yeah.
You're not going to just dump him in 2 minutes.
So we think Hexit is safe.
Yes.
Is that? Yeah, we do.
Yes. Oh, well, he's safe. I think he's, Dan, what do you think? I think he's safe until the next time something like this happens again.
Yeah. I mean, if there's another horrible gaffe like this, then the suddenly the seat's going to get very, very hot. But I mean, for the moment, he's weathered it. But I mean, it's probably like a pretty thin ice type deal.
Yeah, and David, real quick, because I know we're long here, but what kind of voice is the Trump administration losing here? It didn't seem to me Mike Waltz was a hardcore MAGA voice. That was one of the things I think that was appealing to some mainstream Republicans, is that Congressman Waltz never seemed to be one of those guys who wanted to remove the U.S. from some of the entanglements, some of the different places that we were in the world. So what kind of a voice is being lost in the Trump administration if Mike Waltz is out?
That's a really astute observation. You're absolutely right. He's had to kind of change and wiggle his way through some position changes as he moves into the MAGA White House, if you will. Look, I think they're going to look for someone that can button things up and that can get on the page. I've heard Steve Witkoff could be a potential here, so look for that. I'm not sure that will happen, but Witkoff could be the guy, so we'll see.
Very interesting here as we wrap up this edition of the show. And of course, stay tuned to CBN News for more coverage on this as we'll see what the fallout is from Mike Waltz out as National Security Advisor. Until next week, David Brody, Dan Andros, always a pleasure to talk to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, John.